Hello, and welcome to Foley's Russian Bees, located just outside of Indianola, Iowa. We specialize, as you might have guessed from our name, in Primorsky Russian honeybees, Russian packages, and Russian nukes. We do also bring in other types of bees for local distribution to Iowa beekeepers. My name is Jason Foley, owner and operator of Foley's Russian Bees. I am a certified master beekeeper, both with the University of Florida and the Great Plains Master Beekeepers. In this course, you will get an in-depth look at our queen rearing practices and learn everything you might need to know to start making queens yourself. The course is fairly long, so I've broken it out into several videos that can be watched at your leisure. I cover the basics on up to more advanced practices and show you the differences between a hobby approach, sideliner, and commercial type operations. I hope you enjoy your learning experience and utilize the information to start rearing your own queens or to further your current practices. If you have any questions, I can be reached via email at russianbeeguy@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy your learning. Alrighty, so let's start out by talking about queen rearing basics. Probably the simplest way you can make queens, make additions to your apiary, is a walkaway split. It's the simplest thing you can do in the world. You go to a hive that there's two boxes sitting there, you pull them apart. So you pull the two boxes apart, so now you have two colonies technically. And you don't even have to search for the queen. She's going to end up in one of the two boxes. And the colony that doesn't have a queen will go ahead and make one. You should probably do your due diligence here and just double check that both boxes have at least a frame of nice young larvae in there. If you have really bad luck and you had just split the boxes, who knows? Maybe the queen is with all the young frames of larvae in box 1, and box 2 is got all emerging brood and no young eggs or larvae that the colony could turn into a queen. So, I mean, at least go in there and check that both boxes have at least one frame of nice young larvae. So the colony without a queen is going to go ahead and make one. The process by which any female honeybee could become a queen is simply that the colony is going to go and pick a number of prime larvae based on scent and age. The bees just have a magic way of knowing how to do this. They will take that larva. I mean, they don't pick it up and remove it out of the cell, but they will take that larva and they will feed it massive amounts of royal jelly. Now, every larva, when it first hatches, gets a little bit of royal jelly from nurse bees. But when they want to make a queen, they will just put tons and tons of the royal jelly in a cell, way more than any larva should have. And this royal jelly will activate genes in the queen's body, or in that larva's body, that turn her into a queen. What it basically does is it allows her to develop a spermatheca, a organ inside of the queen's body that will store semen for up to 7 years. It increases her size about 40%. There's other adaptations it does. It changes her scent profile. Anyhow, so the royal jelly is produced by nurse bees, so young bees. There is an amount that is still produced by older bees, but the prime candidates are bees that have just hatched in the last week or two are going to be producing the most royal jelly of any of the bees in the colony. And they also like to stay with the brood frames so that they can feed the young larvae that little bit of royal jelly and then go and supply them with bee bread and other. So nurse bees will feed young larvae a combination of small amount of royal jelly in the beginning, and from there they will be feeding them bee bread, which is basically pollen that is fermented with high moisture honey. The bees will bring in that nectar and they'll mix it with the pollen in those cells, and a fungus, actually a beneficial fungus, will get in there and ferment it so that it breaks down that outer shell of the pollen kernel and allows the bees to digest it and get nutrition, much like the way that bacteria in the human gut will break down our vegetables and allow us to get nutrition from them. Anyhow, we're getting a little off of track here. But so going back to it here, your walk-away split, the queenless colony will go ahead and make 15 to 30 queen cells, hopefully. Even if it only produces 5, that's something for you. That's the simplest way of doing it. So you've gone from 1 colony to 2 colonies. Another way of doing it is to take a hive and bring a nuke box out with you. And you can search frame by frame by frame through that colony until you find the frame that has the queen on it. You pull that out of the hive and put that in the nuke box, and go ahead and give several frames into that nuke box that have honey, pollen, and room for the queen to continue laying in there. And move that off to another location. And I don't mean you need to move it 2 miles away. Just move it 10 feet away and face it a different direction. So that original colony now is queenless because you've taken the queen out in that nuke box. And this full overflowing hive of bees, yes, you took 4 or 5 frames out of it, but you're going to still have the massive population that was there to begin with. And if I didn't already say it, you want to pick a really nice fat hive in your apiary there. You want one that's high population, that has good amounts of nectar in it, that you see beautiful laying brood patterns and stuff in there. And you'll go ahead and make that hive queenless. Same process. They're going to make queen cells in there just like they did in that walk-away split. But with this one here, because you're going at a larger level, you'll have numerous frames that there'll be queen cells on in that colony. And you can then take a frame out that has queen cells on it, put it in a mating nuke, give them a couple of frames of honey and emerging brood, and maybe a couple of frames of plain waxed foundation, so they'll have room to grow onto. And set that out in your apiary for the queen to hatch out and go on a mating flight and give you another productive hive. If you're lucky, you'll get 6 or 7 frames out of that one colony that have eggs, or not eggs, that have fully developed queen cells that you can do this process with. Try to leave one nice frame in that parent hive so that it too will fix itself and keep going. Now you always run the chance of the colony producing a queen, she kills any of her competition, she goes off on a mating flight, and it's a really windy day and she gets blown off course. Or she goes out there and she meets a blue jay or a robin or a dragonfly or a bald-faced hornet or any of the number of things out there that love to eat bees naturally, but with a queen, with her being 40% bigger and not a great flyer, period, she kind of becomes a prime target for any of these predatory insects, animals, etc. that are out there in Mother Nature. So, unfortunately, if she gets ate and comes back, she won't come back, and your colony at this point doesn't have any more young eggs and larvae. They all have gotten old enough that the colony can't turn those into queens, and you have a situation then where you are hopelessly queenless. You can fix this by just taking another frame of eggs and larvae from a neighboring colony in your apiary and throwing it in there, and you give them a second shot. At this point, I would really suggest just buy in a queen, or buy in a queen. If you have another colony that was a small nuke and your larger hive that's still there, you could always combine a nuke into it as well. I'm suggesting buying in a queen or fixing that colony with a nuke under the premise here that you have set that colony back, 16 days to develop that queen cell. And then the number of days before she went off on her mating flight, and then the number of days that you are sitting there going, oh my gosh, this colony is hopelessly queenless. I can't find a queen in here. There's no eggs. We are way past the time frame that she should have started laying eggs. I see big fat queen cups being drawn out, but there's nothing in them, and there's no eggs on any frames. Just all the stuff is going wrong for you. You know that the colony's hopelessly queenless at that point. You don't want to give them another frame because a whole bunch of your nurse bees have gotten too old to really do a good job producing royal jelly at this point, but they probably could still form out a queen. But you essentially would be setting the hive back another month, because even if they did produce another queen, let's say 20 days go by and you determine your colony is hopelessly queenless. You start the queen rearing process all over again there with a frame of eggs and larvae, and it's another 16 days there, so we're at 36 days at this point before another queen hatches out. Then you are at 3 days before she goes on her mating flight. You're at another 3 to 7 days after that before she might start laying eggs, and then you're at 21 days after her first egg has been laid before it's an emerging nurse bee that then can start replenishing the population of your colony. So just for safety's sake, we're at 36 plus maybe, let's say it took 7 days before she started actually laying. So we're at 43 days. Oh my gosh, I can't math today. 43 days. And then you add another 21 on there for that next bee to actually hatch out. So 43 is now 64. 64 days you have now set that colony back. That's definitely 2 months worth of production there that you have lost out of this colony. And you probably haven't set it up for success then for fall time either, depending on where you are in the country. Obviously with Iowa here, we have a shorter growing season than, say, Georgia or Florida or California. We have a solid 4 months of dearth and winter time there. We might even go 5 or 6 some years, depending on how our fall and spring really onset. So anyhow, going back to things here. You have done a walkaway split. You have talked or done making a hive queenless so that it produced massive amount of queen cells for you. If you have wax foundation on your frames, not plastic foundation coated in wax, but the pure wax foundation, it does give you a lot of ease to be able to go in there with a small knife and cut out those queen cells on those frames. So you might have a frame and you're sitting there and you're like, gosh, there are 25 queen cells on the front and back of this frame. But if it's plastic foundation, it's really hard to get in there and cut those cells out and be able to move them to a mating nuke or to a regular nuke split in your apiary without damaging the queen. Sometimes those queen cells don't have a lot of extra space in them, so as you're cutting it out, you squish the one into the cell a little bit and you might damage the larva. Well, if you have pure wax foundation, I don't care if it's got wires in it, you can go in there and cut around there and not worry about crushing the cell, because you're just cutting the honey or brood cells that are around that queen cell, and the queen cell itself is staying completely intact. So this would be step 3 for covering the basics here, that without grafting at all, you can get a colony to produce queen cells for you and be able to cut those out. So we're continually moving up in production here on the number of queens you can produce from a single colony. The next step is kind of a hillbilly method. You can make a hive queenless, and you can have, again, this plays off of the last one there for having a pure wax foundation and being able to cut the cells out. But you will take a frame from your hive that is just loaded with young larvae and pull it out of there and adjust your frames however you need in the box there. And then you're going to take 2 rocks, 2 bricks, 2 sticks, anything, and lay them on the top bars of that colony so that you create a nice gap between it and that frame that has all the larvae on it. You'll take that frame and you'll lay it face down so that the good larvae, the super young larvae and the eggs are all facing down in the hive there, and has enough room because of the sticks or the bricks or whatever else you used in there that they can form out full queen cells in that vertical position. Now the bees will jump onto this frame and will almost ignore anything else in your colony just because the cells are already pointed in a vertical nature, triggering them to want to draw them out as queen cells. Because naturally, the bees have to kind of build the cell out and then build it down, because queen cells are always hanging vertically on your frames. This plays into then grafting and the other processes that are used for making queens and stuff, where they hang bars in there that are vertical also. Anyhow, so you'll leave the colony alone. You'll come back in 6 days. They should have beautiful queen cells for you there. You can leave them in the colony there for, what is it, another 5-6 days. It's 5 days. 5 days for the queen cell development, 6 days for her to hatch. Anyhow, you can cut those out, and they're all perfect queen cells that are just vertical and stuff. It looks like you basically grafted them yourself at that point, because you're cutting out all these perfect cells, and you can load those into your nukes, your splits, whatever you've got there in your operation. And again, you're making queens, but you're doing it at a slightly different level than if you were doing in the prior process I was talking about here. Hope I'm not covering stuff too quickly here for you or anything. So moving on from all of these manipulating on a hive and getting the bees to do the work for you, we come on to actual grafting. So there's a few things that you're going to want to look at for your colonies and for the process. So in the very beginning here, before you start grafting or anything, you should identify a colony in your apiary that is just going gangbusters, that has 2 boxes with brood in them, maybe that they're even trying to lay into a 3rd box, has a huge population, they're constantly coming and going with pollen and nectar there, that the queen is laying a beautiful brood pattern, that the hive is just healthy as all can be. If you've done a mite count, you didn't find any mites, you don't see any signs of deformed wing virus, chalk brood, that thing is pristine. okay? So you're going to want to find a colony like that with a really good population. It's got to have good food in that colony there. So you want to see a nice band of pollen on the frames that have honey. Or, that you'll see a nice brood cluster, and that there's the band of pollen, and that there's the honey there and everything. You need to have all that stuff going on. A day before you plan to do your grafts, I like to make the colony queenless. Some people argue and say that a few hours after a queen is removed from a colony, heck, sometimes even a few minutes after that queen is removed from the colony starts to roar. They start to be in distress that they don't smell that queen pheromone as strongly as they thought they should. And that is true. You will have the hives roar up on you. You will have them noticing that the queen pheromone scent is going downhill. But I don't see them trying to form queen cells within that 24-hour period that I'm giving them. I am trying to get the bees in a state of mind where they will focus on my grafts from the first second that I put them in the hive, instead of just making the hive queenless, and an hour later I'm putting in my grafts, and I'm hoping that the bees start thinking that they're queenless and start paying attention to those grafts and feeding them. I want that hive already in a state of utter panic when I put those grafts in. Basic ways for doing grafts. There's the JZBZ method out there that I use. There is another method that I'm not a big fan of. I only have met a few beekeepers that are, but it uses, basically uses a small cage that you will put over the queen. It's the queen in your colony. You'll put it over her, and it has all these cells in there that she can lay eggs into. So they'll put that in a colony. They'll go ahead and isolate the queen, put a few nurse bees in with her, etc. They'll let her go ahead and lay in all those cups, and you remove it, and then you can pop out all those cells. It has little cups that those go into that have, and anyhow, you put those into the hive. They're supposed to draw them out, just like with the JZBZ system, grafting out of the cups. Then once those cells are developed, there's these little hair roller tubes that you pop onto the queen cell that allows you to then have her protected, and she can hatch out into that cell in the colony, or you can just have it for transport, that it kind of is, you can put all these hair rollers together and carry them in a nice insulated box out into your apiary and remove the cells and put them into your mating nukes. So there's that system there. And again, it sounds really awesome that the queen is, again, laying the eggs for you and you're not having to manipulate them that much yourself. But there's a lot of acceptance problems with that system. I hear time and time again people that have tried it, they couldn't get the queen to actually lay in those cups. When she was isolated in there, she didn't want to touch them. A little tip or trick that I've heard along the way, a guy that does use this system successfully, he likes to put those cups inside of the hive for a day or two so that the bees can clean them, so that they can walk over them, they can spread their scent on them. Those little plastic cups will absorb the hive scent. And that makes a lot of logical sense there, because if the queen's walking on a surface that she finds distasteful, that's alien, foreign to her hive, there's no reason for her to think, oh, I should lay in these spaces. So I see the logic there, and I have not tried it myself. I do not know the science behind it exactly, because I haven't tried it out myself. So at this point, I'll just say that it's a tip or trick if you use that system. I will go ahead and put in the video a a information on that system right here so that you can look it up. I can't think of the name at the moment. So anyhow, moving on from there, we go back to the JZBZ system here. The JZBZ system looks a little bit like this. So you have there in front of you, you have cell bars with green plastic cups snapped into it. And those bars, if you look a little bit towards the upper back of the photo there, you will also see a wooden frame. So those cell bars, you will graft individual larvae into each one of those cups, and you will then hang them so that the cups are facing downward on those frames, the wooden frames, and you'll put that in your hive. For actually grafting the larvae themselves, here are two tools that are commonly used in the industry. So you have the German grafting tool there on the left-hand side that I love to use, but is really best suited for wet grafting. And we'll get into that here in a little bit. The Chinese grafting tool is the one on the right-hand side there that has the red handle and the little yellow cap on the back of it there. The Chinese grafting tool is predominantly used for dry grafting, and it's typically the instrument that most beginning beekeepers start out with. Well, most beginning beekeepers don't immediately jump into wet grafting. So if you're not going to jump directly into wet grafting, most get started in the grafting process with the Chinese tool. Looking at the Chinese tool, you have a tip on it here that basically is a flexible reed of some material. A lot of times in the industry now, it's just kind of like a plastic reed. Old school ones used to be made out of other materials, much like you have the reeds in musical equipment, musical instruments. So anyhow, besides that grayish thin reed that's in there, you have a little push plunger there. Let me go ahead and bring up a video here and show you the operation of it. So here with the Chinese tool, you can see that in this one, it's a wooden plunger pushing the larva off of the reed. There isn't actually a larva there, but if you had picked up the larva with that little reed, then you would use the plunger to just gently shove her off into the queen rearing cup. So let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of these tools. The Chinese grafting tool, again, it's great for beginners because they don't need to worry about wet grafting or anything else. It's best used for dry grafting. It's very cheap to buy. This tool is maybe 99 cents to $2 depending on where you find it at. You know, Amazon. You can go on Amazon and get like a 50-pack of these and bring that cost down to like 50 cents a tool. So you don't need to buy 50, but you know what I mean. Amazon, it's going to have bulk deals out there for you on this. So the cons with it is that reed is a little bit fragile. If it's made of plastic, it's not going to snap on you, but I have seen people put permanent bends in those reeds. Essentially, when you put that reed down into the cell, it goes down and it hits the bottom of the cell and it starts to curl and it goes underneath the larva, and then the viscosity of the fluid on the larva leaves it stuck on the reed, and you just pick it up out of the hive there. I have seen beginners before put the reed down, and they're putting it at such an angle that it's not doing the nice curling. It's really just like impacting it, almost like it wants to make the reed fold up like an accordion. But if you're approaching at that hard of an angle and your reed's not just curling under nice, you can put a 90-degree fold in that reed. And once it gets that, it's hard to straighten out because then you just can put another fold in it. It's problematic in that respect. It is horrible for wet grafting. So when that plunger is pushing down and pushing the larva off of the tool, it is pushing it into the wet liquid of the cell there that for wet grafting you're using a liquid. You put it down, it basically pushes the larva underneath the surface of the liquid and suffocates it. You have to get real delicate if you're using the Chinese grafting tool and are wet grafting, that you just are gently putting the larva on the surface of that moisture. We'll get into wet grafting here with the German tool here in a bit, and I'll tell you more details on it. You also have more chance of damaging the larva because with the Chinese grafting tool, that wood or plastic plunger is coming down and pushing into the larva itself. And if when you're trying to put it in your JZBZ cup, you're pushing it down and at any point the larva gets pinched between the cup and the plunger, you may not see it, but you've squashed that larva and it's no good anymore. Even if you just hurt the larva, it will greatly impact the development of the queen and whether she'll be a viable queen for you in the end. So that's the pros and cons with the Chinese grafting tool. Let me take a moment here and actually explain wet and dry grafting. So dry grafting is picking a larva out of a cell, putting it into a cup, and giving that to a hive. You might get a little bit of moisture or royal jelly with that larva as you are grafting it into that cup, but you're not supplying the cup with any moisture. If you are doing more than a couple bars at a time, you should have some wet paper towels, a sponge, something around there that you can cover over the top of those cups that you've grafted into, just to try to help keep some humidity on them, because you don't want the grafts to dry out. When that larva dries out, it's dead. So another useful thing is if you could be in an isolated room with a humidifier and bring up the humidity in the room to like 100%. If you live in Iowa, middle of summertime, just go out and sit in your car and graft there because it's already 100% humidity in Iowa in the middle of summertime. But anyhow, so that's dry grafting. Wet grafting is when you take that bar of the cups. Maybe I got a photo here. Yes, I have a photo here to show you. You can see that I've gone ahead and filled those cups with a substance. I'm using royal jelly that has been harvested from colonies. Some people will use straight royal jelly. Other people will buy in royal jelly or harvest royal jelly and they'll mix it down with some water, some distilled water. Other people will tell you that you can use yogurt. I did actually do an experiment with the yogurt, but I'll get into that here after I finish up the importance or the premise of wet grafting here. You're putting moisture into the cups in a decent enough amount that you can now graft. I safely do 4 frames at a time. I could probably do more than that, but I've learned along the way that a little bit of caution gives you a little bit of success. So every time I do one little step, that's trying to make my process cleaner, trying to make my process more efficient, trying to be even more delicate with the larva, trying to have proper temperature, humidity, all of those things, it'll make you 5% better. and another thing will make you 5% better, and another thing will make you 5% better. And before long, it adds up to, oh, I had 95% success rate on this run. Oh, I had 100% success run on this. Anyhow, so with the wet grafting there, you are putting moisture into the cells so that you can graft larger quantities of larvae before having to make a trip outside and put them in a colony. The moisture itself buys you that time. Also, if you're using pure royal jelly, you're already triggering the colony into thinking, this larva has way too much royal jelly here. It must need to be a queen. So you'll be not only hanging the bars in there vertically, triggering the colony into thinking that those are queen grafts, you also now have a abundance of royal jelly there that the bees are recognizing as somebody starting the process of turning this into a queen. University studies and old beaks will argue with you that the bees don't leave that harvested royal jelly or the yogurt in place there, that the nurse bees come in there and they will actually eat that and deposit fresh royal jelly in its stead. Whatever the case may be, it's buying you time, it's keeping the proper scent in the hive, and it's making it so that you can be more successful. So anyhow, I was mentioning there about the yogurt. I read into this and I read into this, and I kept thinking yogurt is much cheaper to buy. It's readily available. Why don't I give this a try? If it's just as successful as royal jelly, I'll switch over to yogurt. Also, if you're a person that's not harvesting your royal jelly and you're buying it in, that's the same thing as taking the chance of buying nukes packages from any old source out there and hoping that they're clean. You might be inheriting a little bit of disease or problems from that origination hive from that royal jelly. So anyhow, I tried the experiment there, and what I did is I went back to back. Every colony that was in my experiment, there was a frame in there with the royal jelly and grafts, and there was a frame in there that had yogurt and grafts. And I performed this all summer long through my queen breeding season. Different times I would change it up and I would try a different brand of yogurt. Or I would switch over to Greek yogurt that's supposed to have a higher protein content to it. I even went as far as trying some of the flavored yogurts out there. I had real doubts about it, and that was proven true, that flavored yogurt will give you 100% fail rate, okay? I also tried it that I'm like, well, just in case one frame of grafts was put in a less favorable spot of the hive than the frame that had the royal jelly on it, let's also try alternating the bars, because every frame holds 3 bars on it. Let's try alternating it and putting a yogurt, a royal jelly, and a yogurt. Or on this one here, going royal jelly, yogurt, and then royal jelly. I'm droning on here, but after an entire summer of testing, it really came back as a 50-50 shot. And I don't mean that 50% of those yogurt grafts take and grow out. I mean that you will go to your first colony and you will check it there, and they did not mind yogurt. So they built out on both the yogurt and the royal jelly. I would say that the royal jelly grafts always seem to be a little bit bigger. So anyhow, you go on to hive number 2, and you'll go and pull your grafts out, and 100% of that yogurt frame was ignored, while yet they built perfect, great, beautiful cells on that royal jelly frame. over and over and over I did this experiment. And like I said, I switched it up that sometimes frames would be a combo of royal jelly and a combo of, and I don't mean I'm combining the two substances, but you'd have the bar there of the royal jelly and a bar there of the yogurt. And time again, they either accept it or they don't. There was no indication there between the colonies on strength being a factor, on temperament, on anything else. I could not discern any difference in these colonies, and it always turned out that it was 50-50. Some hives are okay with yogurt and some aren't, and it's going to be impossible for you to go out there, knock on the side of the hive and go, hey, are you okay if I graft yogurt? You're not going to know. So anyhow, that's why I don't graft with yogurt at this point, because I don't want 50% success rate on my grafts. So here's my favorite tool, the German grafting tool. It kind of looks like a dentist tool. So this is a real close-up shot of it here. And you can see that the tip of it just has an itty-bitty spoon, and then it has a weaving shaft that comes back and forth there. It's basically so that the tool itself is not getting in your way as you're trying to get it down into the cell and pick the larva out. It kind of looks like a dentist tool when you buy one of these. It's just a small skinny metal rod that on the tip has this little grabber or whatever, and you can picture that that's trying to remove plaque from your teeth as a dentist. In fact, some people do use dental tools at their disposal to do grafting. But anyhow, the German grafting tool. All right, the pros and cons of the German grafting tool. 1, it's great for wet grafting. 2, it's, in my opinion, it's more precise. Maybe it's because of the years of me using the tool as opposed to the Chinese, but I just have a better sense of control with it. And the tool itself, it has a smaller surface area and doesn't quite obstruct your view as much. And it's definitely more gentle on the larva. The cons of it is it costs more than the Chinese tool. I would say that you're looking at anywhere from $12 to $20 to get your hands on a German tool, unless you can find a really good Amazon deal. Again, it's like everything on Amazon these days. You just have to keep typing in some different searches and you'll find somebody out there that's selling it under market value. Another thing is that it absolutely sucks for dry grafting. That same benefit of the viscosity of the fluid lifting the larva up off the tool is the exact opposite. If you try to have that larva on your tool and put it into a queen cup that's dry, there's nothing to lift it off the tool. So you're sitting there trying to drag the larva, the edge of the larva on the cup, and hoping that it's sticky enough that it pulls it off the tool. So if dry grafting is what you're going to do, the German tool will absolutely be a nightmare for you. So that would be the number one con to getting the German. So moving on, there is one other tool out there that is commonly used in the industry. It's called a master grafting tool, and this is something that is used on the commercial level. It's kind of a marriage between the Chinese grafting tool and the German grafting tool. With this tool here in the picture, you can see that it's kind of like this metal device with a tongue, and it's that shaft that's coming out from it, that small piece of pipe, has a little metal tongue inside of it. And when you push it on that rear back trigger there, it goes ahead and extends the tongue out. Here, I'll bring up a video here quick for you and show you just, it's not of the tongue itself in operation, but it's how quickly people get with this tool here. It has the benefit of pushing the larva off of that tongue when you release the thumb trigger and depositing it in your cup. But yet has all the benefits of being a extremely small tool that you can use to pop in there, that already is pre-bent to slip underneath the larva, and has a small surface so that it's not having the larva stick to it much. So pros with it, you can wet or dry graft with it. And by wet or dry graft, with a little bit of finesse, you'll be able to do either one of them. You can leave the tongue extended out to drop the larva down onto the fluid. The fluid comes up around the tool, and the viscosity of the fluid lifts the larva off of the tool and allows you to pull the tool back up out of the jelly and leave the larva sitting right there on the surface. So with this Pro tool here, if you left the tongue out, you could then dip it down and again pull the tool out, and the viscosity of the fluid is removing the larva for you. If you are dry grafting with it, you of course release the trigger there, and the reed retracts back up into the cell and it deposits the larva. It's actually a little more gentle than the Chinese tool, because with the Chinese tool, you're shoving the larva off with a device, and that device has the potential for pinching the larva into that queen cup. If you instead have a tool and it's just pulling itself back out, and the lip of the device is then pushing the larva off, you're removing that chance of pinching the larva between the tool and the cup. It's just literally falling off and you're removing the tool. It will be your most expensive option. These tools run for $100 plus, depending where you're getting them. So for the beginner that's just trying to get their feet wet, it's not usually the tool of choice. I actually don't own one of these, but I'm going to start playing around with it this year myself. So let's take a look here at timetables. We've talked numerous times at this point about queen development, the number of days, how long it can set back your hive. If you were to have a queen go off on a mating flight, get 8, and then you were trying to salvage the hive. This timetable here, feel free to screenshot it, copy it out into your notes exactly. But from experience, I have developed this timetable. A timetable is just a fantastic starting point for a beginner to go with here. And then as you are going down this journey, you can go ahead and make slight edits to it for what is happening in your own apiary. I mean, for instance, you may have an incubator that runs a little bit on the warmer side, and you need to adjust your time scale then for how long the queen grafts are going to be in that incubator. Maybe you've observed with your own operation that there's a day difference in eggs showing up in your hives. So anyhow, this is a great starting point, and I just want to go over it step by step here so that things will make more sense later on as we're actually getting into grafting. So it says there day 1 egg hatches. So you're going into a hive. You obviously can't graft an egg that's attached to the bottom of the cell. You will kill it. You will destroy it trying to break that off. So what you need is to be able to have a hatched larva there, and a 1 to 2 day old larva is the ideal age for grafting. And here it's showing day 2, day 3. So day 1, the egg, it says hatches, but it's laid. And day 2 and 3 is the beginning of the hatch, really. So anyhow, you want a 1 to 2 day old larva. So the tiniest larva you can possibly see on that frame is what you're going to be grafting. And you'll take your grafts and you will put them in a cell builder colony there. That's displayed here by the peachy line, and it will take 5 days before those grafts are capped. So you see it goes from day 2 to day 6. That's 5 days there. If your cells are not capped on that 5th day, I normally just go ahead and dispose of any of the cells that aren't capped. 5 days is the magic number. For some of you, you're going to go ahead and leave your cells in that hive for an additional 6 days because you don't have an incubator. If you do have an incubator, on day 5 there, day 6 on the chart again, but on the 5th day of those cells developing, I take them out of the hive and I put them in an incubator. And 6 days later, that's that golden line, the queens have matured enough that the cells are ready to hatch. So on that 6th day, I'm putting them into mating nukes. I want the queen cells to go in there and within 24 hours have them hatching out. If you were putting them into small nukes or mini mating nukes, putting them in them sooner than this time frame does incur the problems of them possibly getting chilled, not getting enough attention from the small population that would be in a device like that. So like a 3-frame nuke or a mini mating nuke, the little styrofoam boxes, I have to wait until the last possible moment and put them in there, and you will have great success rate on them hatching. The queen has a hatching period there where she could hatch at that very moment or she could hatch a little bit later. It really depends on the larva you grafted. So if you were very, very, very consistent with the grafts that you were pulling for how young they were, and if your incubator ran at a perfect temp or your colony kept itself at a perfect temp, technically all of your grafts should hatch in a few hours of each other. But if you're grabbing larvae of different ages, you're kind of stretching it out. Instead of a larva that's 5 to 6 hours after hatching, you're grabbing one that's a day or 2 old, or even 3 days old. You shouldn't probably be grabbing larvae that big. But if you're grabbing larvae that has a 1, 2, or 3 day age difference between them, then you can picture that your queen hatching period is also going to have a 1, 2, or 3 day variance there. So from the time that the queen hatches, we jump down below, and there is a period of time there. Well, on the chart there it says day 13, day 14, day 15. That is your period of time for the queen hardening. She needs 3 days from the point that she hatches that her body, kind of like her exoskeleton, hardens up, her wing muscles kind of get relaxed and everything else, and she can actually then go on an orientation flight. So an orientation flight is her first little experience outside of the hive. Usually it's like any other bee's orientation flight, and she comes out and she'll circle around the colony some and go up into the air and kind of get a little bit of the lay of the land there, but she doesn't venture too far away. once she's kind of got a feel for stuff and has come back to the hive, she will go off on her mating flight. And her queen mating flight can happen anywhere there from day 17 to day 21. Typically, at day 21, or after day 21, she's too old to go off on a flight. Mother Nature steps in and says, no, you don't want to go on that mating flight, and you never will. So you've got a magic period of time there in tan that you're hoping you have some nice sunny weather, that you have some days that are, up there in the 60s and 70s, or warmer yet than that, that your queen can go off in a mating flight and meet drones and be successfully mated. If you are getting rain for day 17 through day 21 there, every single day it's raining, especially in the 10 o'clock to 2 p.m. time period, you kind of got to figure by day 22 there that entire set of queens are going to be garbage. You should do yourself a favor and just write it off and get rid of them all and start the process over. You can try to hang on to them. You can try to put them into colonies, but you are going to have a massive turnover in queens that are basically come into that colony and either are accepted and become drone layers, or come into that colony and they immediately kill the queen. And, well, I shouldn't say immediately. There's always that queen introduction time. But the moment that she steps out of that cage, she'll walk around some and they kill her. Or in very rare instances, you're going to come back and there's going to be queen cups all over in that hive. And this queen walking around, but there is no eggs in the queen cups. There's no eggs on the frames. There's nothing going on because that queen never got mated. And at some point, she will try to lay some drones, but 9 times out of 10, the colony fixes itself before then. They just off the queen and you're not going to find her. All right, so now you have the baby blue line. So on day 20, all the way out to 26, is going to be the time period that the queen can start laying. Mother Nature's fickle. So even though she could have gotten mated all the way back on day 17, it can take day 20 to 26 before eggs will show up. Some queens, they just need a day of downtime after being mated, and they start popping out eggs. Other ones, they take their sweet time. They say it was a traumatic experience for them, and they don't want to get to work yet. So you will see eggs possibly all the way out to day 26 would be the start. Most of your queens are going to start laying in that day 20 to 22 range, or a good percentage of them. You'll note there a little purple block, and it says the commercial standard for harvest. A lot of commercial operations, they go on a 10-day cycle from hatch. So basically, when the queen hatches out and they know that she should have hatched out, they start their 10-day cycle there. Because there's only so much time that queen's going to go on a mating flight and come back. And after they've passed the point of no return for that queen going out and mating, they a lot of times harvest right then and there. They know that within a number of days, she should start laying. For my own operation, I like to go on a 14-day rotation, and I talk about it in some other training areas of this video. But at 14 days, there's a few things that have happened. First of all, when I'm going back through my mating nukes, I'm only pulling and harvesting queens that I see some eggs in the mating nukes. Because on day 14, aka day 26 on the chart, she has to have started laying by then. I say have to because it's like a 98% to 99% chance that she should lay at that point and not at a later date. There's always the once in a blue moon exception. So anyhow, day 26 is my harvest day, and day 26 is when all of the nukes I'm opening up should have some eggs in them. So this is my vetting process in a way. Another thing is that between that day 10 of the commercial guys and my day 14, most of your nucleus colonies or mini mating nukes, if that queen didn't go off on her mating flight, they almost always will kill her. So they're actually doing me a favor and vetting my mating nukes for me. So if I get into a mating nuke and I don't find a queen in it, they've already started building a queen cup and etc. in there, I know that, and it has no eggs, I know that that queen either A, got ate by a dragonfly, or B, didn't get properly mated and the colony killed her off. I know this because I also have checked my hives at day 10 and came back later at day 14, and a percentage in there of queens magically disappeared. And over time, it became apparent that in those colonies that there had been a queen and then there wasn't a queen between day 10 and day 14 of the queen vetting process. It was determined that the queens that had not been mated, the colonies wanted to get rid of. So I am on a 14-day cycle. There's other operations out there in recent years that have moved to a 21-day cycle. It became very popularized after social media icon Bob Binney had done an experiment in his own apiaries with queen acceptance into colonies based off of how long that they had been in nukes. And he found that there was this magic 21-day cycle that worked best for improving the acceptance rates of queens into colonies. Because I run mini mating nukes in my operation, I cannot do that. I'll tell you right off the bat that when that queen starts laying in a mini mating nuke, it doesn't take her long to fill up the 3 miniature frames in there with eggs. If you wait another whole week after she starts laying to go out there and pull her, it's crazy, but you are going to find in your apiary all of these grapefruit-sized clusters of bees hanging off of tree branches. And it's because those mini mating nukes, when she ran out of space, they went ahead and said, hey, we're going to make a new queen, and this queen that is very young, very virile, we're going to stop feeding her and chase her around, and we're going to go ahead and swarm. At that stage there, I mean, it's really easy to trigger that swarming process. So if you have a mini mating nuke, or I shouldn't say if you're running mini mating nukes in your operation, I will tell you right now, you are going to have horrible success rates on pulling queens if you go 21 days. You'll come out there and you're just going to find somewhere there within a 2-day window, you're going to have a ton of queens leaving those mini mating nukes. You're also going to have queen cells that are being developed out that you've got to cut out of them to be able to put the new cells in there, because honestly, a mini mating nuke does not do a good enough job of feeding the queen. There's just not enough nurse bees in a mini mating nuke to do a good job feeding those new queen grafts, or not grafts, the supersedure or the swarm cells that they're putting in there. So I cull out every single queen cell that I do find in a mini mating nuke. So, as I've said, feel free to copy this timetable, but I highly suggest after you get a few different graphs under your belt, you examine it and you see if there's a little adjustment here or there that you need to do for your operation. Maybe the next year you change some of your practices. You actually add an incubator to your operation. You try a different temperature with your incubator. It's a different time of year or something. There's going to be some things that affect your timetable, and you might have to adjust something here or there by one day.